My parents blew my inheritance on my sister's luxury wedding, then expected me to foot the bill when she bankrupted her business. My life, or at least the one I knew growing up, always felt like a rigged game. I'm Daniel, a 32-year-old software engineer, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one, the quiet achiever. The one who meticulously planned every step, earned every penny, and always picked up the pieces. My younger sister, Sophia, who's 29 now, was the polar opposite. She was the star, the sun around which our family's universe revolved. Charming, vivacious, effortlessly magnetic, she simply existed, and the world, especially our parents, bent to her will. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was a glaring, neon sign that screamed Sophia's world. When I needed money for college textbooks, I worked extra shifts at the campus library, my hands smelling faintly of old paper and dust. Meanwhile, Sophia, fresh out of high school, was handed the keys to a brand-new convertible, a gleaming silver ribbon tied around the steering wheel, just for graduating. I went to a state university, busting my ass, working part-time to ease the burden on my parents. Sophia? She needed to experience Europe, so off she went on a lavish study abroad program. Her Instagram feed a constant stream of sun-drenched beaches and designer shopping bags, all funded by mom and dad. Every pragmatic career choice I made, the steady engineering path, the pursuit of financial stability, was met with a lukewarm "good job, Daniel." Sophia's whimsical artistic endeavors, her fleeting passions, were celebrated with grand pronouncements and immediate financial backing. "Sophia is a visionary," my mother would declare, as I silently paid my own rent for the modest apartment I moved into the moment I graduated college, desperate for a taste of true independence. The most painful example of this imbalance, the one that still chafes like a raw wound, involved my grandmother. My paternal grandmother, bless her soul, was the only one in our family who truly saw me, truly valued me. She was a shrewd businesswoman, a no-nonsense woman with a heart of gold beneath a tough exterior. Before she passed, she left me a substantial inheritance, almost $500,000, specifically earmarked for my education or future investments. "This is for your future, Daniel," she told me, her hand warm on mine. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." My parents were named as custodians, entrusted with managing the funds until I turned 30. That $500,000 was my safety net, my future apartment, my security in a world that often felt uncertain. It was a promise. I turned 32 years ago. I'd expected a conversation, a transfer of funds, at least some acknowledgement. Nothing. My parents simply avoided the topic, deflecting whenever I brought it up. I told myself I'd press them soon, but life got busy, and I trusted them. Foolish, I know. Then came the engagement announcement. Sophia, at 29, was finally tying the knot with Mark, a guy who struck me as perpetually confused and whose only real talents seemed to be spending his trust fund. My parents, predictably, were ecstatic. My mother started planning Sophia's dream wedding before Mark had even finished proposing. The budget, whispered in hushed, reverent tones, seemed astronomical. "It's going to be the wedding of the century, Daniel," Mom gushed, her eyes sparkling with an almost manic joy. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I knew my parents weren't exactly rolling in money. Their lifestyle was comfortable, but certainly not conducive to $1 million wedding. I tried, gently, to interject, to suggest a more modest approach. "Are you sure you want to go so overboard, Mom? Weddings are so expensive." She waved me off with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Don't be negative, Daniel. This is Sophia's day. We'll find a way." The pre-wedding preparations became a whirlwind of extravagance. High-end caterers, a bespoke designer dress flown in from Paris, a live band from Nashville, a floral budget that could probably feed a small village for a year. Every detail was meticulously chosen for maximum wow factor, every expense justified by the mantra, "It's for Sophia's happiness." Then, a few weeks before the big day, the hammer fell. I was having coffee with Mr. Henderson, a family friend and their financial advisor, and the manager of my grandmother's trust. We were talking about general investments, and he casually mentioned, "That was quite a withdrawal your parents made for Sophia's wedding. Almost the entire trust, if I recall." The coffee cup almost slipped from my hand. My mind went blank. Withdrawal. I managed to stammer, my voice tight. "What withdrawal?" Mr. Henderson looked at me, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Oh, Daniel, I thought you knew. Your parents accessed your grandmother's trust. They said it was for Sophia's wedding expenses." He looked genuinely uncomfortable, realizing he'd just exposed a family secret. My heart pounded, a sickening drum against my ribs. My grandmother's legacy, my future, drained, all for a wedding. I confronted my parents that evening, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "My inheritance? You used my inheritance." My mother sighed dramatically, as if I was being unreasonable. "Oh, Daniel, don't be so dramatic. It was family money, after all, and Sophia's happiness is paramount. Your grandmother would have wanted Sophia to be happy." My father nodded in agreement, his face a stone mask. "It was a loan, son," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "We'll pay it back someday." He offered no timeline, no plan, just a vague, empty promise. I walked away from that conversation feeling hollowed out, as if a vital part of me had been ripped away. The upcoming wedding, once just an irritating spectacle, now felt like a direct assault on my future, a monument built on the ashes of my grandmother's love and my stolen dreams. The wedding itself was a blur of forced smiles and glittering betrayal. It was held at the most exclusive venue in the city, an old historic mansion with manicured gardens and soaring ceilings. Sophia wore a custom-made gown that reportedly cost more than my first car, shimmering with intricate lace and beads. The air hummed with the sounds of an orchestra, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the forced laughter of 1,000 distant relatives and acquaintances. I stood in the background, a silent observer of my own dispossession, feeling like a ghost at a feast. Every smile, every toast, every dance step felt like a personal insult. My parents, oblivious to my internal turmoil, beamed with a pride that bordered on self-congratulation, constantly reminding anyone within earshot how much they had sacrificed to give Sophia her perfect day. Sophia, of course, was radiant. She floated through the event, accepting compliments with the effortless grace of someone who truly believed she deserved every ounce of adoration. I watched her, searching for a flicker of understanding, a hint of guilt, anything. But there was nothing, just pure, unadulterated joy. She seemed genuinely unaware, or perhaps simply uncaring, of the foundation of stolen dreams her happiness was built upon. Mark, her new husband, matched her enthusiasm, his every move a performative display of affection and entitlement. They truly were a perfect pair, each feeding off the other's self-absorption. After the wedding, the lavish lifestyle didn't just continue, it escalated. Sophia, with Mark's dubious business acumen, decided to launch 2 passion projects, a high-end luxury boutique in a trendy part of town and an online custom jewelry business. My parents, still trapped in their enabling delusion, provided significant seed money. I suspected it was more of my inheritance, or at least new debt they'd taken on in my name. I tried, once again, to offer sensible advice. "Sophia," I'd said, "starting 2 businesses at once is incredibly risky. You should really consult a proper financial planner. Maybe start small, focus on one thing." She simply waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Daniel, you're always so negative. You just don't understand the modern market. Mark and I have a vision." My parents, standing by, chimed in, "Daniel, darling, you're just jealous. Sophia has flair, something you wouldn't understand." Initially, Sophia's businesses had a splashy debut. They invested heavily in aggressive, high-spending marketing campaigns, billboards, magazine spreads, Instagram influencers who charged outrageous sums for a single post. The boutique hosted exclusive launch parties attended by minor celebrities and socialites. Sophia and Mark, riding this wave of initial hype, immediately upgraded their lives. A new luxury SUV for Sophia, a designer watch collection for Mark, constant international travel that was always vaguely described as business trips, but looked suspiciously like lavish vacations. Their social media was a relentless montage of exotic locations, Michelin-starred meals, and designer clothes. Living our best lives, Sophia would caption, followed by a dozen emojis. They'd often brag to me over family dinners about their seven-figure revenues and disruptive business models, clearly trying to rub it in. I watch from a distance, the financial analyst part of my brain screaming red alerts. Their spending far outstripped any actual income, and the success seemed built entirely on borrowed money and superficial hype. Mr. Henderson, the family's financial advisor, occasionally called me, his voice laced with concern. He couldn't explicitly break client confidentiality, but his veiled warnings were clear. Daniel, he'd say, I'm seeing some unconventional accounting practices, a lot of personal expenses being run through the business, and some rather aggressive loan acquisition. I tried to relay these warnings to my parents, showing them some basic financial projections I'd run. They simply scoffed. You're just overly cautious, Daniel. Sophia is a visionary. You're too pragmatic for these new industries. The facade, as I predicted, began to crack. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Suppliers started complaining about delayed payments. Employees whispered about bounced checks. The luxury image, once so carefully constructed, began to fray. The boutique, once bustling with curated events, became eerily quiet. Sophia and Mark, despite their continued social media charade, started showing visible signs of stress. Arguments would break out in hushed tones during family gatherings, followed by forced smiles when anyone else entered the room. My parents, suddenly aware of the gathering storm, began their subtle campaign to pressure me. Sophia is having a little trouble, Daniel, my mother would sigh dramatically over the phone. She needs a hand, a little investment from her successful brother. They suggested I invest in her failing companies. I refused, calmly explaining that it was a sinking ship, a black hole of debt, and pouring more money into it would only hasten its demise. I offered sensible advice. She needs to cut her losses, liquidate non-essential assets, maybe explore bankruptcy and start fresh. Get professional legal and financial advice, not just a bailout. But they ignore my pragmatic suggestions, clinging to their desperate fantasy. They just wanted me to open my wallet and make the problem disappear like I always had. The crisis hit with the force of a wrecking ball. Sophia's businesses officially collapsed. Lawsuits from unpaid suppliers piled up, eviction notices for the boutique were posted on the door, and public complaints from defrauded customers flooded online forums and local review sites. The initial splash of success had evaporated, leaving behind a crater of debt and shattered illusions. Sophia and Mark, once so effortlessly glamorous, now looked gaunt and haunted. Their designer clothes seemed to hang on them, their forced smiles cracking under the strain. I even saw Mark arguing loudly with a creditor outside the boarded-up boutique one afternoon. My parents, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them, became increasingly desperate and aggressive. The subtle hints turned into direct demands, then outright haranguing. My phone rang off the hook day and night. "Daniel, you have to help your sister," my mother would shriek, her voice thick with tears. "She's your family. Are you just going to let her lose everything?" My father, usually more reserved, joined the chorus, his voice laced with a condescending tone. "Blood is thicker than water, son. You have a moral obligation." They employed every emotional manipulation tactic in their arsenal. "After everything we've done for you," my mother would begin, her voice trembling with perfected sincerity, "we raised you. We sacrificed everything. How can you turn your back on your own sister?" They played the victim, constantly telling me how heartbroken they were, how this was tearing our family apart. They'd compare me to Sophia, not in a way that praised my stability, but rather to highlight her supposed fragility. "Sophia is so delicate, Daniel. She needs us. You're strong. You can handle this." They even went so far as to minimize Sophia's culpability, blaming unforeseen market shifts, jealous competitors, or even bad karma for her failures. It was never her fault, never her reckless spending, never her lack of business sense. It was always some external force. And the constant refrain, the one that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard, "We're a family, Daniel." As if that phrase alone should magically compel me to sacrifice my entire savings, my future, for their golden child's colossal mistakes. Their demands escalated from vague requests for help to specific astronomical figures. First, it was $200,000 to tide Sophia over. Then, as the true extent of the debt became apparent, it shot up to $300,000 to prevent total bankruptcy and save her good name. They repeatedly reminded me that I was the only one with significant savings, conveniently forgetting or perhaps deliberately erasing from their memory the origin of those savings. They saw my hard-earned money, the money my grandmother had specifically left for me, as their personal emergency fund for Sophia's endless string of failures. I refused, steadfastly, despite the emotional onslaught. "Mom, Dad," I'd say, my voice calm but firm, "this isn't an investment, it's a bailout. You're throwing good money after bad. Sophia needs to face the consequences of her actions. She needs to declare bankruptcy, sell whatever assets she has left, and start fresh with a real plan. I am not enabling this." I offered solutions: consult a bankruptcy lawyer, liquidate the remaining inventory, seek professional business restructuring advice. But they weren't interested in solutions. They were interested in a quick fix, a magical money transfer that would make their problems disappear. And most importantly, they weren't interested in Sophia facing any real consequences. "That inheritance discussion is in the past, Daniel," my mother would snap. "This is about now." Frustrated by my unwavering refusal, my parents resorted to an even more despicable tactic. They concocted a desperate scheme to garner public sympathy and put immense pressure on me. They contacted a few local news outlets, a small community blog, and a human interest segment on a local news channel that often covered small business stories. They painted a heartbreaking picture of Sophia as a victim of unforeseen economic forces, a brilliant young entrepreneur tragically undone by circumstances beyond her control. They portrayed themselves as loving, heartbroken parents desperately trying to save their daughter from financial ruin. And, subtly, insidiously, they hinted at a heartless family member who refused to help, a pillar of the community who was turning their back on their own flesh and blood. They never named me directly, but to anyone who knew our family, the implication was clear. It was a vicious smear campaign designed to publicly shame me into compliance. Then came the final, shocking twist. One morning, I received a frantic call from my mother. "Daniel, it's horrible. Someone broke into Sophia's boutique. Everything's gone." She sobbed into the phone, recounting a fabricated story of a devastating theft. My blood ran cold. I knew the boutique had been empty for weeks, its doors boarded up. This wasn't a random act. This was a staged event. They were hoping to file an insurance claim, to get some money back, and perhaps to add another layer of drama to their victim narrative, further implicating the unnamed, heartless relative who, they'd imply, was somehow connected to this tragedy. They wanted to pin something on me, to force my hand, to make me the villain in their fabricated drama. The morning after the supposed break-in was a whirlwind. A stern-faced insurance investigator named Mr. Stone arrived, accompanied by Detective Miller, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. My parents, Sophia, and Mark put on a theatrical display of grief and victimhood. My mother, teary-eyed, clung to my father, who adopted a stoic, wounded patriarch pose. Sophia, pale and trembling, occasionally dabbed her eyes with a tissue, dramatically recounting the loss of her valuable inventory. Mark, for his part, hovered protectively, offering platitudes about the cruelty of fate. They subtly tried to shift suspicion onto me, weaving a narrative of my resentment and anger over the family's financial situation. My mother even mentioned, in a carefully casual tone, that I still owned a baseball bat from my high school days, a thinly veiled attempt to plant a seed of doubt. The bat, a forgotten keepsake from my championship Little League team, sat gathering dust in the back of my old closet at their house. When it was my turn to be questioned, I remained calm, my voice steady. I provided a detailed alibi for the night of the supposed break-in. I had been working remotely until late, confirmed by my company's VPN logs, and then spent the rest of the night gaming online with my friends, who could verify my presence. I came home, made a sandwich, played some Xbox, and went to bed, I stated, looking directly at Detective Miller. I didn't leave my room until I heard the commotion this morning. Then I shifted gears. Detective Miller, Mr. Stone, I began, there's a much larger story here that you need to understand. I laid out the entire sordid history, my grandmother's inheritance, specifically earmarked for me, and how my parents had misappropriated nearly $500,000 of it to fund Sophia's extravagant wedding. I detailed Sophia's subsequent reckless spending, her disastrous business ventures, the mounting debts, and my parents' escalating, desperate demands for me to bail her out. I calmly presented the timeline, the evidence of financial mismanagement, the public calls for me to help Sophia. I've been warning them for months that this was going to happen, I concluded, and when I refused to throw good money after bad, they started a public smear campaign against me, hinting that I was the heartless family member causing all this trouble. I also mentioned a crucial detail, Sophia's business partner, Vanessa. Vanessa and Sophia have been having heated arguments recently, I told them. Vanessa was always the more grounded one. She might have some insights into the actual state of Sophia's finances and any desperate measures they might have taken. The detective and the investigator exchanged a quick, knowing glance. It turned out they were already ahead of me. Mr. Stone, Detective Miller said, "Why don't you share what you found at the adjacent businesses?" Mr. Stone nodded. We canvassed the block, looking for any active security footage. A few of the neighboring stores had cameras, and one, specifically a new deli that just opened, had a wide-angle camera that captured most of the street, including Sophia's boutique entrance. My heart hammered in my chest. At 2:13 a.m. on Saturday morning, he continued, the footage clearly shows Sophia and Mark arriving at the boutique in a U-Haul van. They were not breaking in. They were moving things out. Large, heavy bags and boxes. He then slid his tablet across the table to me. The grainy but clear footage showed Sophia and Mark not as victims, but as active participants in a carefully orchestrated removal of inventory, just hours before the break-in was reported. But that wasn't the only plot twist. And then, Detective Miller added, her voice chillingly calm, we revisited some of the earlier security footage from a month ago, when Sophia's business was clearly in trouble. We noticed something strange. The footage shows Sophia and Mark, accompanied by a third person, going in and out of the boutique late at night with large, empty bags, and then later, removing full bags. This was weeks before the alleged theft. It appears, Mr. Daniel, that your family was not just staging a break-in for sympathy and insurance. They were also attempting to liquidate unsellable, debt-ridden inventory and claim it as stolen for a double payout. My jaw clenched. They weren't just trying to frame me. They were trying to defraud the insurance company twice. And speaking of collaborators, Mr. Stone interjected, your mention of Vanessa was very timely. Ms. Vanessa reached out to us anonymously just yesterday. She provided us with extensive documentation, including detailed internal financial reports and private messages, showing Sophia's egregious financial mismanagement, her lavish personal spending using company funds, and even a detailed log of Sophia's plans to fake a theft to claim insurance money. Vanessa, it seems, was trying to protect herself from legal repercussions and, frankly, got tired of covering for Sophia. The confrontation that followed was brutal. Detective Miller and Mr. Stone marched straight into the living room, where my parents, Sophia, and Mark were still huddled, trying to maintain their victim facade. The footage was played. Vanessa's detailed testimony was presented. My parents initially tried to deny everything, to bluster, to accuse me of fabricating lies. Daniel, how could you do this to your family? My mother shrieked, her voice cracking with manufactured outrage. But the evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. The lavish wedding, the stolen inheritance, the bankruptcy, the staged break-in. It all came tumbling out, exposed in its ugly truth. Their faces, once so self-assured, crumbled into masks of shock and fear. Sophia dissolved into hysterical sobs. Mark turned a sickly shade of green. I looked at them, my heart a strange mix of sorrow and grim satisfaction. "This ends now," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "I'm not covering for anyone. Not anymore." I looked directly at my parents. "I will be pursuing legal action to reclaim my stolen inheritance and for the emotional distress you've caused. And I will fully cooperate with the authorities regarding the insurance fraud and false reporting." I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer, Mr. Davies, right then and there, the sound of the dial tone echoing in the suddenly silent room. The manipulative grip my parents had held over me for decades shattered, leaving them stunned, their carefully constructed world in ruins around them. The immediate aftermath was exactly the kind of chaotic spectacle I had anticipated. The police, armed with irrefutable evidence, proceeded with charges against Sophia and Mark for insurance fraud, filing a false police report, and other financial crimes related to the gross mismanagement and potential embezzlement from the business. My parents, while not directly charged with the fraud, were heavily implicated for their involvement in concealing the truth and their clear attempts to manipulate the investigation. The story, inevitably, leaked to the local media, morphing from a human interest piece about a struggling entrepreneur into a scandal of family betrayal and alleged fraud. The golden child narrative, carefully cultivated for decades, imploded into a messy, public disgrace. The legal process that followed was arduous and emotionally draining, but I stood firm. I filed a civil lawsuit against my parents for the misappropriation of my grandmother's inheritance. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, about validating my grandmother's wishes, and about reclaiming a future that had been stolen from me. Mr. Henderson, with a heavy heart, provided crucial financial testimony and documentation that meticulously detailed the draining of the trust. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, was a bulldog, relentless in his pursuit of justice. The family was in utter turmoil. My parents, once respected figures in their social circle, found themselves ostracized. Friends and acquaintances who had once fawned over Sophia's success now offered only pity or, worse, condemnation. Sophia and Mark, facing the full brunt of criminal charges and utter bankruptcy, became pariahs. Their lives, once a whirlwind of luxury, were now a constant struggle against mounting legal fees and the crushing weight of public humiliation. My own emotional journey through this period was a complex tapestry of relief, grief, and a profound sadness. There was an undeniable sense of liberation in finally standing up for myself, in refusing to be their fall guy any longer. But that liberation came at a steep cost. My family, as I had known it, was irrevocably broken. The dream of a harmonious, loving family, however distant that dream had always seemed, was shattered. I sought therapy to process the deep-seated trauma of a lifetime of favoritism and betrayal, and to learn how to forge healthy boundaries. My close friend, Chris, was my rock throughout it all. He didn't offer unsolicited advice. He just listened, provided a couch to sleep on, and reminded me, repeatedly, that I wasn't alone. Weeks later, as the legal and financial pressures mounted on them, my parents made a desperate, final plea. They called me, requesting a meeting. I agreed, bringing my lawyer with me, insisting on a neutral location. There were no apologies, no genuine expressions of remorse for what they had done. Their faces were drawn, their eyes haunted, but their intent was purely transactional. "Daniel," my father began, his voice devoid of its usual authority, "this whole thing is spiraling out of control. It's destroying us." My mother, surprisingly subdued, chimed in, "Please, darling, can't we just make this stop? It's gone too far." Then came the bribe. "Drop the lawsuit," my father offered, his voice strained, "and we'll pay you back a portion of your inheritance. Say $100,000. Just make this all go away, for the sake of the family." My lawyer subtly nudged me under the table. I looked at my parents, their desperation stark in the harsh fluorescent lights of the meeting room. I felt a surge of cold fury, but my voice remained calm. "No," I said firmly. "This is no longer about the money, Dad. It's about justice. It's about standing up for myself. It's about the fact that you were willing to destroy my future for Sophia's fleeting whims, and then try to frame me for it." I made sure my phone, placed discreetly on the table, was recording the entire conversation. It was a perfect encapsulation of their continued manipulative nature, devoid of any genuine empathy. The case proceeded. My parents, faced with the overwhelming evidence, were forced to agree to a repayment plan for my inheritance, a painfully slow trickle of money that came from liquidating assets they had once valued more than my well-being. Sophia and Mark, thanks to Vanessa's cooperation and their status as first-time offenders in a major fraud case, avoided jail time, but faced severe financial penalties, extensive community service, and a permanently tarnished reputation. They moved to a smaller town, attempting to rebuild their lives in a much humbler fashion, forever marked by their decisions. I moved into a new apartment, a place I chose myself, a blank canvas for a future I was finally building on my own terms. I invested the money I began receiving from the settlement wisely, slowly rebuilding the financial security my grandmother had intended for me. I forged new, healthier relationships, surrounding myself with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide or how I fit into their narrative. There's still a pang sometimes, a phantom ache for the family I always yearned for, the one I never truly had. But then I remember the chilling words, the manipulative pleas, the cold calculation in their eyes. And I know I made the right choice. My family, as it was, is irrevocably broken. Sophia and Mark are living a life of consequence, a stark contrast to their gilded past. And my parents are left to grapple with the bitter fruits of their favoritism and manipulation, their golden child having turned to dust. The question lingers, a quiet echo in the silence of my new, peaceful apartment. Can any semblance of family ever truly be salvaged from such deep betrayal? Or am I, Daniel, truly free, but alone? Perhaps. But for the first time in my life, I'm charting my own course, no longer bound by the invisible chains of their expectations, and that, in itself, is a kind of profound freedom.